Let's get started. Welcome to the third regular virtual network meeting of the Michigan Farmed Institution Network for 2020. And for those of you who are just joining us for the first time or need a reminder, the Farmed Institution Network is a space for learning, sharing, and working together to help farmed institution programs grow. Our local food purchasing program is called Cultivate Michigan, and it helps institutions source, serve, and track more local foods. MIFIN is coordinated by the Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems, where I am housed, and is supported by MSU Extension. And before we really dive into the content, I wanted to take a moment for some acknowledgements. Getting started here. So for those who may not already know, we do have a friend and an old colleague, Caitlin Wojak, who has left her position with MSU Extension for a new position with the USDA Midwest Regional Office, supporting school-based child nutrition programs. So I just wanted to mention her, given that she made many contributions to getting this network going and keeping it rolling. And we'll miss her energy and contributions to the network and having her around as a colleague in this space. But we wish her and her family the best of luck in her new endeavors. I also wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge the time that we're in right now, which, you know, consists of so many things: a global pandemic, Black Lives Matter marches, calls to defund the police, and rising unemployment. And all of us are affected by these crises in some way or other. So we really appreciate you taking the time to connect together today around Farmed Institution. And I also want to acknowledge and thank many of you who are on the line today in particular, and those who also couldn't be here today, who serve on the front lines in the pandemic and who are working tirelessly to get food and other services to the people that need it. So thank you. So we have a awesome agenda today with some great guest speakers, and from here, we're going to go into introductions and connecting together, and then we'll move on to our first speaker, Teresa Hendricks with Migrant Legal Aid, who will share with us an update about living and working conditions for farm workers, including in this time of pandemic. Teresa joined us for our Michigan Farmed Institution Network gathering in person in November, so we appreciate this update from her now. And then we'll move into two state level or state agency updates. One is planning for fall from our Michigan Department of Education colleagues who work on child nutrition programs, Emily Mattern and Jaime Malnar. And Lori Yelton will share an update on Michigan's food and agriculture sector. And Lori is from the Department of Ag and Rural Development here in Michigan. And then we'll provide just a few updates from our end at the network before we finish up for today. And if everything rolls on time, then we may finish up a little bit early, which I'm sure no one will be sad about. So to start us off with introductions, I wanted to introduce the members of our Farmed Institution Network team who are bringing this meeting to you all today. So my name is Colleen Matz. I'm the Farmed Institution Specialist at the MSU Center for Regional Food Systems, and I coordinate the network, and I'll be facilitating today. And Mariel Borgman, who is on the line, but we may not be able to see her today. She is with MSU Extension Community Food Systems and a member of the Michigan Farmed Institution Network Management Team. She'll be moderating and tending to tech and the chat box. And Zaire Parati, who is on the line. Give a wave, Zaire. She is our Farmed Institution Data Manager with the Center for Regional Food Systems and also part of the MIFIN management team. She'll be our note taker today. So your job in this meeting today is to actively listen and participate primarily through the chat box when prompted and when you have any questions. And we can start by with a little practice here by entering your name and affiliation into the chat box. Go. And I will turn it over to Mariel, and she can maybe share a little about who's able to join us today, and also call your attention to a little demographic survey that MSU Extension folks are hoping to gather information about who is here today. So we'll flip to that next, Mariel, if that's okay.
Sure, thanks, Colleen. Yeah, it looks like we have quite a few people representing lots of different organizations. So Paula from Groundwork, John from MIFS, Sarah from the National Kidney Foundation of Michigan, Phil from Fresh Systems LLC, yeah, Patty. Patty, if you could put your organization in there, just so we have that on there as well. We know you're a part of this meeting today. Noel and, Abby from MSU Extension, Noel from Center for Regional Food Systems, and Jude as well. Garrett also from MSU Extension. We've got Xavier from Spectrum Juvenile Justice Services, Jenna from, Food Service Director from West Ottawa, John Fear, John, if you, you've got it here, Bronson Director of Food Service, Tony Alexander from Chartwells, and Larry from the Food Bank Council of Michigan. And I was going really quickly, so I may have missed someone. Oh, Tony Alexander from Chartwells, I think, and Lindsay Sclera also from Center for Regional Food Systems. So welcome, everyone. So glad to see and hear you all virtually. So I put a link to our MSU Extension demographics survey in the chat box. I'm also going to put it in one more time so it's at the bottom of the list. And this is something that we collect on a regular basis within MSU Extension as part of our civil rights compliance. And it also helps us with our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to make sure that our programs are reaching all audiences. So it's a completely voluntary survey to fill out. But it doesn't take very long, and we really appreciate it if you were willing to fill that out for us to just give us that information. So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And should we give folks a minute to do that? We can.
And it looks like I missed a couple of people. So Rosie from Valley Hub. Hi, Rosie. I missed you. We usually work in the same office. It's sad. And also Lori Yelton, Michigan Department of Ag and Rural Development.
Did you call out Jenna from the USDA office? She's here today too.
I think so, but maybe not. Sorry, I was going quickly. So hi, Jenna. Okay, I might have missed it. No, it was the other Jenna. You're right.
Two Jennas.
Two Jennas today.
and claps from Jenna from the USDA office. All right, so with that, and thank you, I wanted to have one more space for us to get connected today in this virtual space that we're in. So I had this question on a recent meeting with a bunch of national partners, and I thought it was a good one. What is outside your window, or what is the view from wherever you are? Please type into the chat box.
I think we've got lots of nature. So some oak trees, garden, a fence, sunshine, and browning grass. It has been very warm. A couple gardens, more trees, a nice breeze. delivery van. Some of us are at home and some of us are at work. Let's see, some buildings, a garlic patch and ferns and a compost pile. Yeah, no window. So hopefully, John, we can all share window views and you can pretend like you are looking out our windows too. Right.
All right, it is a beautiful day where we're sitting. Looks a little windy from here in Lansing, but I'm sure it's different all over. I haven't been outside much yet today myself, so I'm looking forward to getting there after this call. All right, so moving on, we are going to turn it over promptly to our first speaker today, our friend Teresa Hendricks, who is Director and Senior Litigator at Migrant Legal Aid, is going to share a bit more about farm worker living and working conditions. Take it away, Teresa.
Okay, I just clicked on something so I could see my presentation, and it went away. There it is. It needs to be bigger. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I get the afternoon session, which means I need to wake everybody up. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of my story. I started with Migrant Legal Aid when I was just starting law school, and I've been with them for 25 years. And one of the parts of the job that I really love is when we get to go on outreach, because that means we get to go out of the office, go out to the migrant camps and talk to folks and, you know, get to meet and interact with them and see conditions. And as I graduated from law school and moved up, I no longer get on outreach as much, and I'm envious of the law students now that get to go out and they're already out in their van. And we've had to pivot a lot in the way that we approach the population because of the current pandemic. But we've still found that we've been really effective in reaching out to them. So I want to talk to you about their living and working conditions in case you haven't visited a lot of migrant camps. And it will vary a little bit how they're housed and how they're treated based on what their status is. And I break it down into 3 categories of farm workers. The traditional one that most people are familiar with is the family group, where the whole family comes from another state, or they live here year-round, but they work in agriculture for part of the year. So the families that come up from Texas and Florida, which is most of ours come from those feeder states, they will work in asparagus in April, and our season will run through all the crops until you get to the later crops, which are like apples and pumpkins in the fall. And of those people that come from other states, we call them migrant workers because they're actively migrating for work. But our other farm workers have the same type of family structure, but they're seasonal, meaning they live in Michigan, but they're working part-time, and it's seasonal, and it may be in a packing shed or a meat pack processing or dairy or something like that. Among those workers that I just mentioned, those 2 categories, the migrant and the seasonal, about 50% of them are undocumented. And they've been maybe here 25 or more years, and they have not had a way to legalize. And so they continue to work with undocumented status. So, and if anybody has any questions about, well, wait, how can they work undocumented? Shoot me some questions in the chat box, and I'll try to cover that. But the 3 categories determine how they're going to be treated, what rights they have, and their willingness or not to stick up for themselves. So the 3rd category is the one we call the H2A category. It's a special visa where you can bring workers over, usually from Mexico or Guatemala, but in the hotel industry, you'll see more people from Jamaica and Puerto Rico. But in our industry, in the fields, we're seeing mostly Mexicans and Guatemalans on H2A visas, which is a temporary visa. And I consider them the most vulnerable of all the workers because they have even fewer rights than an undocumented worker who is migrating or seasonally living in Michigan. And their living conditions will vary between those groups. So the seasonal workers will live in their own home. It'll usually be a more stable environment. Their income is very low, and so they're subject to vulnerabilities because of their poverty and their legal status, especially if somebody in the household is undocumented. That makes the whole family at risk. I call those mixed status families. And then we have the migrant workers who come up from the other feeder states, and they will stay in temporary housing that's provided by the grower. And that has to be licensed by the state of Michigan, which is very easy to get licensed and very hard to lose your license, even with really bad conditions. And they will be put in bunker style housing or, you know, group housing, and it's very dense by design. So you'll find a lot of bunk beds and crowded conditions and a lot of common areas that they have to use. You know, the common laundry, bath facilities, kitchen, and even in the fields, there'll be common areas where they have to congregate. So you can imagine their normal health issues in a season have to do with pesticide, which I'm going to tell you how bad that has gotten this year. And then also on top of that, we're dealing with COVID-19. And even though there are supposed to be special guidelines and a particular executive order that strives to protect them, we're seeing that enforcement is very lax and compliance is very spotty. And so I have been, at the beginning of the season, we're still early in the season, I have been overwhelmed with phone calls, exhausted and mentally drained, trying to find ways to protect the workers and reassure them that they have these rights and that they can stand up for themselves. So one of the things that I first deal with when I get these phone calls is that there is an outbreak. So we know there's an outbreak of 100 plus people at Bilmar, JBS farm, JBS meat packing. And the egg farms, there's Herbrook Egg and Sunrise Acres. There's outbreaks there. People are afraid to death to go home to their families or to continue working, but that they don't really have a choice. They can't go without the income. And then more recently, there was an outbreak of 30 or more people at Maroa Farms. And then depending on what farm you're dealing with, you'll get a very different reaction to dealing with a crisis. So for example, at Perro Family Farms, they had an outbreak and they shut the plant down, quarantined it all, and disinfected it, waited 14 days, and then brought the people back on board. That's a really, really good thing that they did for the workers. You'll get drastically the opposite of that at other places where there's no real policy to enforce wearing a mask, there's no social distancing being required, and even there's a difference between one supervisor in charge of 50 people and another supervisor in charge of 50 other people. One will require masks and wear one themselves, and the other one will not. And so you can even be less safe depending on what supervisor you pull. So those are the three categories, and the degree to which they're all subject as essential farm workers to the requirement they must keep working for their salary, and most of the bulk of their income will come from this seasonal work. So let's go to the next slide and talk about what we're seeing when we're on outreach trips. So very, very, very common is for us to find rodent and bug infestation. We get sent pictures of bed bug eggs of active infestations, and we also get phone calls and text messages. We use WhatsApp to communicate with our clients. That's their preferred method of showing us things. We see pictures of conditions where you can see that there's no ability to social distance, and there's no effort being made to make sure that they're safe. We're also seeing some farms that are very responsible. They're moving bunk beds apart. They're putting in acrylic barriers between the bunk beds. They're putting in instructions to not sleep with your heads close together. But that's a very rare farm that does all of those precautions and then sticks with them in our estimation. So everybody is kind of in a state of hoping that nothing goes wrong, trying to do a little to make it look like they're complying, but really the risk is ever present, and we're going to see more outbreaks as we go through the season this year. We found that even though they're supposed to supply PPE to the workers, very few of them have them, or they'll just give them one mask or two, and it's completely shot at the end of the next day, and then there's not supplies because they're not plentiful, or there's just no real desire on the employer to make sure that those stay replenished. So as a result of that, we had started early on doing some fundraising that we called 5 for Farmworkers, and it just involved assembling a COVID-19 Farmworker Safety Kit, which we have surgical quality masks, we have KN95 masks, we have hand sanitizer gloves, and then we have all the safety literature that they would need, and we package that all into and seal it into a sanitized plastic bag, and we can deliver those and hang those on doorknobs and disinfect them as we leave. And we found that they really appreciate those. We've gotten calls for replenishing of those supplies. And we found that the mask wearing varies greatly depending on the kind of farm work that they're doing. So for example, in asparagus picking, they're on a picker, which is has a little motor, and you sit low to the ground with your feet up in stirrups, and you bend over from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. picking asparagus, and you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with other people. Usually 6 can fit on an asparagus picker, although they can put wings on them and there'll be more. So they really don't have any way to social distance during that entire time. And then they are often in a bunk bed situation when they do get home, and they all have to quickly use the same kitchen and the same bathroom facilities. If they are wearing masks, sometimes they'll take them off if it's just too hot. It gets very, very warm in the summer, and we do lose every year, not always in Michigan, but I'm talking about the entire nation. We lose somebody to heat exhaustion every year because there isn't enough shade, or they're not taking in enough water that's not provided. We know that the employers are supposed to provide those types of things, but it doesn't always happen. In fact, it rarely happens. The workers have to provide their own most of the time. And the way that they travel is also putting them at risk from COVID and any other communicable type of disease, because they often will carpool for saving gas to a field site, or if they come over on the special visa, they have no transportation, they have none of their own vehicles, so they have to all ride on the same bus. And you've ever ridden on a school bus, it's, you know, there's not enough room for your knees hardly. Well, they're supposed to distance on the bus, but that would require making 2 trips to every field. And so we've seen buses packed with 34 to 40 people on a bus. They're still sitting next to each other in a lot of these working conditions. When we get to the blueberry season, we know that they all will use a common weigh station, and so there's always a lineup at the weigh station to wait to get your blueberries buckets weighed, and then to have your badge swiped so that you count for the piece rate that you're picking. And we know that the people that are coming have very little knowledge of what Michigan is doing to protect them from COVID-19 or what they can do about it. Now, the number one fear that I hear is that they are afraid, but they're very reluctant to make any complaint. They sometimes don't even want to give me their name, which is very unusual. They're usually very open and direct because they know we have an attorney-client privilege. But they are so afraid, sometimes they don't even want to describe too specifically where they are working because they fear retaliation. If they lose their job, they will go without food, and then they're, you know, just dollars away from being homeless and hungry. So we do what we can to tell them their rights and to let them know what resources are available to them. And then I can see in their faces, I can see them weighing their options to either dare to make a complaint and risk their job, or how much of a risk is it if I still continue to work, but I do certain things to try to mitigate the damages. So for example, there are some that have decided that when they get home from work, they have to completely disrobe in the basement, change clothes, wash up before they even go upstairs to their elderly parents or their children. So a lot of them live in multi-generational housing. And so there's vulnerable age groups on each end. We can skip to the next slide. And we are in communication with farm owners, because when there's a problem, we try to reach out to them directly and say, can you fix this? This is what's happening. Did you know what was happening, for one? Do you care? And what would you like to do about it? And some of them do want to do the right thing. So for example, I use the Perro Family Farms example. That would be an example of a proactive, worker protective reaction to what was happening. In other cases, we've seen denial of what's happening and threats to the workers if they call for help at all, or if they make a report to their Department of Health, or other coworkers fearing that if someone near them is heard reporting something, then they will also be adversely affected and lose their job. The employers, we're finding, feel they don't have very good guidance from officials, either from the state or from their own farm bureau organization, their trade association. And so everybody seems to be trying to comply with best practices by figuring it out on their own. So there's a wide variety of what we're seeing. Some bunk beds have placards right on them instructing them what direction to sleep in. Some buses have marked, how to space themselves apart, and others just expect them to just all cram on the bus. The executive order is really, really helpful to us because it says, look, you have to have isolation housing. What if one of the farm workers gets sick, or two of them? How are we going to keep them from infecting the rest of the people in that same housing unit? So the executive order says you have to supply them with isolation housing. And then anybody that comes to that housing has to be wearing a mask. If anybody's delivering food or anything, they're going to be coming and going from the place. But there are very few options for farmers to house people other than paying for a hotel if they do have to have isolation housing. So as these outbreaks happen, we're going to see a really wide variety of how people are dealing with it. With the H2A workers, we're seeing that they are the most reluctant to complain. They have the most to lose, and they have the least legal protections of any category of farm worker. And it's because the law, when it was drafted to bring over these visa workers, it said you're not going to have the same protections of our current farm workers who are domestic, and you're not going to be able to enforce the Agricultural Worker Protection Act, which is our main protection statute. You can't use that at all when you're dealing with a farm worker that came over on a visa from another country. So in that respect, an undocumented worker can use that law for protection, and an H2A worker cannot. So undocumented workers have more rights than these H2A workers. The H2A workers have more to lose because they're under severe threat from their crew leader, that if they complain at all, they will not be asked back. They will be sent home without their pay. If they're hurt, they're on their own. And so they're very unlikely to make contact with an attorney and enforce their rights because they're worried about being blacklisted from the program. And I don't mean that there aren't great rights that we could assert to support them, but the way the system is set up it is not to their advantage to ever stick up for themselves because there's too much for them to risk. And if they only make $7 a day in their home country for a hard day's work, and they can make $14.40 here, the appeal is just too great. But what we're seeing with the visa workers is that they're working about 80 to 100 hours a week, and they're being paid for between 35 and 45 hours a week. And they are loath to complain. They don't want to tip the boat because what they do make is more than they could make back home. So these labor brokers that we deal with are stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars a week from these H2A workers. And at some point, if they complain, they say, I can send you home at will anytime I want. And I've actually seen a couple workers say, well, okay, it's okay to shave off 4 or 5 hours every day from my work. Just don't send me home. So there's a real lack of any bargaining power. And these labor brokers are not actually the farm owners usually. They're like an independent contractor that brokers the labor, kind of like a temp service would. And so the farmers can kind of say, well, we don't really know what's happening with the labor. We just pay our broker by the bin. And so they can pretend they don't care or they don't know, but they own the farm and they are jointly responsible, and that makes us able to pursue the client's rights better. So that's what the lay of the land is from the farm owner's perspective. And by the time a farm owner brings over an H2A worker, they have spent at least $2,000 to get that worker here by visa fees and everything else. And so the labor broker will want to get that money back somehow by taking it from their pay or not paying them for all hours or shorting them a number of buckets. And routinely, their crew leaders, who are intermediaries even between the labor broker and the actual worker, will skim the units that they're picked or the hours that are worked, so that by the time they get paid, they've actually covered their own transportation and visa fees, which is completely illegal. Many of them are charging exorbitant recruitment fees. So in their home country, oh, you want to sign up to come to the United States to work for $14.40 an hour? Well, you're going to need to pay me $3,000. And if you don't have it, I'll take the first $3,000 out of the $3,000 that you earn when you get here. So that's what we're seeing from farm owners. And I can go to the next slide. So this is kind of what we're doing as we pivoted. We do our regular job, but now we have an extra layer of things to do. Our 5 for Farmworkers campaign has allowed us to hand out hundreds and hundreds of Farmworker Safety kits. So you can go to our website, and we try to spread this through social media as well. For $5, we will deliver to the farm worker the entire safety kit. And the literature in it is valuable in itself because it has what to do and what their rights are under COVID specific to them in 3 areas: their living conditions, their working conditions, and their transportation, because those are their 3 areas of vulnerability, which entail their entire life while they're here. We also have 94,000 farm workers and family members in Michigan. So if we've passed out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of safety mask kits, we still have many farm workers who are going unprotected. Our adjusted outreach plan involves more social distancing, less contact directly with the clients, talking from a safe distance if we do encounter them. We've adjusted our hours, so we are here until 10 at night to take calls, and we have an attorney on call. Things happen very rapidly in this line of work. So we had this year the worst case of pesticide poisoning that I have seen for a group of workers in 25 years. And it involved a very toxic chemical which causes acute kidney failure. And we've had some horrible, heartbreaking stories from that, where people are permanently for life never able to work the way they were. And we've seen crop dusters who actually spray the people. But the chemicals that are being used now, many of them are where weeds have become resistant to other chemicals. So for example, Roundup has been around long enough that there are weeds that are resistant to Roundup. And so we call those super weeds. And so they're using paraquat, which is the most toxic pesticide out there. If it's worse than Roundup, you can imagine. And it's banned in 23 countries, but not in the United States. So we have to be rapidly responding to these emergencies, because when you're an H2A worker, the first thing that happens when you get hurt is they ship you out. So they barely have time to reach out to us. And they are literally a disposable workforce, because they will get sent back to their home country and they won't get set up with the rights that they were entitled to, like workers' compensation and insurance coverage, for the rest of their life for anything related to that injury at work. So we have had that adjustment to be more available to them and to have an attorney on call as late as 10 o'clock at night. The new materials that we distributed, they cover the pesticide safety and their legal rights and their rights when they become victims of wage theft. But we also had to be really specific with what they can expect. Your beds should be 6 feet apart. If they're bunk beds, they need to be distanced. They need to have barriers between them. They need to sleep with their heads at the greatest distance from each other. If it has to do with working conditions, they should be demanding that they have a mask and gloves and that they replenish those. We teach them about re-entry intervals. Don't go into a field if you see a sign. Most of the time, there is a very lax compliance with that. So they might walk into a field and not know what toxic chemical was just sprayed. But our material helps them realize that they have a right to that information and gives them forms and phone numbers and resources and clinic numbers that they can call. We also had a wonderful company make cloth masks, and they gave us 500 of them, and they're very popular because they're comfortable and they're self-adjusting, and they're very breathable. We've also expanded into more greenhouse outreach, because we're getting a lot of calls from workers at greenhouses who, you can imagine, they're under very close working conditions, under on a literal line, like a factory line, but they're doing planting or putting the seeds together, and outbreaks there spread very quickly as well. Is that my last slide? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I could talk too much, so I might have gone over my time. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Teresa. That is eye-opening and enlightening and important to know. Any questions for Teresa? Feel free to chat in the chat box if you'd like.
So we have somebody here from the Michigan Kidney Foundation.
There she is.
Me. I would like to connect with you later about some resources, because kidney problems seem to plague the workers most exposed to pesticides, and I would love to find out what resources, if any, there are in Michigan to getting them help.
Yeah, and we also have like an emergency fund as well, that's been funded through like COVID-19 additional funding too. So I'll put my email in the chat box.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Dialysis is not cheap.
No.
Okay, we have a question from Tony. What is the most important thing we could advocate for?
Well, in Michigan, if we could advocate for a guest worker bill of rights, or even a farm worker bill of rights, if we had a labor supportive state representative that would introduce that bill and be willing to fight Farm Bureau, that would be the most protective thing we could do, because that bill would give them the right under state law that they don't have under federal law to things like, when they get sick, to an immediate treatment and immediate phone call to an attorney and an immediate filing of a workers' comp case, and setting them up with the clinical resources that they need, because we have seen so many workers' comp cases this year of H2A workers where they're just sent home. It's an explosion of them. So we're gonna have to figure out a way to deal with that. And then when we see crew leaders stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars, we need a better remedy other than breach of contract. That just doesn't cut it. If it was a bill of rights for farm workers in Michigan, they would be entitled to twice the unpaid wage and then attorney's fees on top of it. So it would be a huge deterrent. So that would be something to advocate for.
Okay, Abby is asking, have there been any champions for legislation like that in the past?
I think other states have tried it. I think there's one other state that has a farm worker protective state law. It's not coming to mind right away. I can ask my colleagues. I'm on a listserv with all of my migrant colleagues throughout the nation, and I can ask them for a good sample of one. If somebody wanted to approach one of their representatives about that, I'm open and available and happy to talk to them about that. And I would find that sample of a good one from another state to start with.
And just a comment from Lindsay Scalera, who's working on the 2020 Michigan Good Food Charter, that Farm Worker Bill of Rights might be incorporated into that brainstorming.
Great.
All right.
One of the champions of legislation that I've worked with in the past is Senator Winnie Brinks and Senator Stephanie Chang. So that's where I would start.
Okay, and Teresa, I can also connect you after this call with our colleague Sarah from the Kidney Foundation too, but it does look like she left her email there for you as well. So with that, and to move on to our other speakers, I think we will wrap up, but thank you again so much for joining us, and we'd love to stay in touch with you on this as things evolve. So hopefully we'll catch up with you again in some months, I hope.
Great, thanks everyone. Thanks, Colleen.
Thanks, Teresa. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit. We're going a little bit back and forth today, from farm topics to school food, back to farm, because we've got some speakers who need to go from one meeting to the other. So we're going to turn it over now to our friends from the Department of Education here in Michigan. Emily Mattern and Jaime Malnar are gonna talk about child nutrition programs and what they're shaping up to look like in the fall. So I'll turn it over to you two.
Thanks, Colleen. Jamie and I are here to give you a little bit of updates of what's happening, and I think that we have Jamie's slides first. So she can start.
You want me to start? I know you probably have a little tighter amount of time. Did you want to skip mine?
No, it's fine. You can go first.
Okay. So yeah, Colleen has been attending our industry calls and our town halls, and we had some different things to report on, and she asked if we could come to this group and share some of that. So yeah, we're kind of skipping around a little bit here, but that's okay. So I'm Jaime Malnar. I apologize, I don't have my camera on because I have little kids, and when I take these calls, I literally hide in a closet. So you can't hear them screaming. So they're having fun though, so it's good. But I've been with MDE for almost 11 years now, and I kind of oversee all things that have to do with food purchasing, mainly with USDA Foods. So I'm going to talk a little bit about USDA Foods entitlement. So what USDA Foods are food items that are procured by the federal government for use in the National School Lunch Program. So these foods include fresh produce, different unprocessed foods like raw chicken and cheese, and then also includes the processed foods. Like, I don't know if you've ever been to one of the school food shows, but there's pizzas and fruit cups and different sort of potato items and sandwiches and all of that. So the money that is used to purchase this is called entitlement. Entitlement is calculated using prior year meal counts. So you can imagine some of our concern when schools close 2/3 of the way through and we no longer have the National School Lunch Program meal counts coming in. So we do have a deficit of meal counts, but we are happy to announce that the USDA is allowing us to actually opt in to it's another waiver, that we would use our school year 18-19 meal counts. So that way we have a full year of programming to budget that entitlement. So it's not perfect, but I think the USDA came to a good compromise with this. Our current rate for USDA Foods is $36.25 per meal. So just to give you an idea, schools receive anywhere from like a few $100s up to, we have one district that gets $2 million to purchase this government food. And then as a state, we get about $43 million total to purchase the food. We get our new, every year we get a new meal rate. So that happens in July. So I'm hoping in a few weeks we will get that meal rate. I'm also hoping that there's an increase in that, up from the 36 cents, possibly using some sort of relief monies or something like that, just to help offset all of these rising food costs. So I should know that within the next few weeks. Speaking about food prices, so we are really concerned as we go into the next school year, whether it's commercial food, USDA foods, any kind of food, we're seeing food prices rise. We're learning we have a USDA Foods legislative rep that this is being discussed at the federal level. And again, I'm hoping that somewhere within the USDA Foods program, we can get additional food and additional money to just make that, to offset those costs. One of the things that we're already seeing, we're seeing beef prices actually triple what they were a year ago. The other expense would be packaging of food. We're seeing people kind of rely heavily on individually wrapped foods. There might be the purchase of trays and carts and different kind of systems to get food from a cafeteria to a schoolroom. So we're watching this closely. We're advocating for flexibilities when possible, advocating for additional funding. We're also going to try to give some guidance on ways to purchase local, ways to repackage. So if you can get things in bulk and repackage them, again, just trying to reduce that reliance on the individually wrapped foods. I mean, they're good and there's a time and a place for them, but just completely relying on them is not sustainable. Let's see here. Next here, it's just food donations. I wanted to touch on that a bit because there's been a lot of different kind of donations taking place right now. So schools are actually welcome to receive donations of food. They can take any kind of wholesome food as part of their food distribution. We do suggest they work with their health department, especially if the food is coming in already prepared. Monetary donations, we're also seeing a lot of that, and that is actually amazing, but it does have to be coded as revenue. I don't know if you want me to get into this too much, but on their reporting, it's like Fund 25, Function 297, and Major Class Code 192 on their fiscal reporting. So I feel like I need to throw that out there anytime we talk about fiscal reporting.
What does that really mean, Jamie, for a food service program if they have more revenue coming in?
It just means that they have to report that revenue to make sure that and that would just be for the monetary. Mm-hmm. Or if they're receiving food, if they're actually receiving food that's part of the reimbursable meal, then they also have to document that as revenue. If they're receiving food that is just like to enhance their distribution, like here's your meal and then here's an additional food box, they do not have to then count that as revenue. They could just consider that to be part of that food donation. They would want to keep record of it just for food safety. They would probably want to keep record of it in case, somewhere along the line, they're going to have to report to their bosses and their school board of what they were doing, and they might want to celebrate that hard work. So we do, recommend they maintain record of that. But if it is part of the reimbursable meal or it's monetary, it has to be coded as revenue. And that's important right now because there's a lot of schools that are running through their fund balances right now. So I don't know. Do I have anything else here? No. I think that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions pertaining to USDA Foods or food donations before we move over to Emily to talk about the many different, we have like dozens of waivers out there. It's really hard to keep track of them all, but somehow Emily does a good job with that.
Any initial questions for Jamie? And we'll have some more time at the end.
Yeah, and I can hang around probably longer than Emily can. So
okay, cool. Then we will move on to Emily. And Emily, please introduce yourself too.
Yes. I'm Emily Mattern. I'm a dietitian with the Department of Education. I just joined the team in January. Previously, I worked for the United Dairy Industry of Michigan, but I've worked in and around child nutrition programs for my whole career. So I'm excited now to be with MDE, and it's quite the time to change jobs and figure out what you're doing. So, but what I'm going to share about today is the waivers. Since school let out in the middle of March, it has been all about waivers, trying to allow schools to feed the kids in their area. And now we are shifting from the unanticipated school closure into our more traditional summer food service program. So just last week, a national waiver was put out there for the summer food service program for area eligibility, extending that through the end of August. So usually the summer food service program, the sites have to qualify. Either like the school has to have 50% free or reduced students in their building, or there's a census map that can be used to locate sites that are within the proper area. So this waiver allows all areas, anybody who wants to be a sponsor, have a site, can serve kids free meals through the end of the summer. So that's really exciting. I think we have like over 150 new sponsors this year, which is like unheard of, but fantastic, because so hopefully we can feed a lot more kids this summer. Then a second waiver that was just extended is the meal pattern flexibility. This one USDA has been doing just on a month-by-month basis, and the purpose of this is really for supply chain disruptions. We've only approved like 5 so far in this pandemic time, and they were actually all for milk. So supply chain issues, some of it was around the Midland flooding, delivery trucks weren't able to get through and things like that. So it's there in case there are bigger issues. Thankfully, we really haven't seen large scale food disruptions. So, but it's there and gives some backup to schools. So it's good that we have it. So then you can go to the next slide. Looking towards the fall and the new school year, so Michigan law requires that lunch is served at schools, and if the school is at least 20% free or reduced, then they have to serve breakfast as well. So schools are working on their own back to school plans for the fall. June 30th is when the governor's back to school roadmap will be released. And we're not quite sure what that's going to totally look like, but there are lots of different conversations happening about what school will look like. From maybe some schools will be able to go back to school kind of as normal. The numbers are low in their area and there's low risk, so they can just feed as they normally do. Whereas other schools, other end of the spectrums, may continue to be completely online and students are at home. But a lot of schools are going to have some version in between, where maybe some students are there on some days and others not on different days. And so we want to have waivers in place to allow schools to serve meals to kids no matter what they're doing for their learning. So we are submitting 13 waivers so far to USDA for the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, and Special Milk Program. And then CACFP will also have some, which is the Child and Adult Care Food Program. So waivers for non-congregate feeding, parent pickup, and mealtime. So those 3 will help, especially if there's just online learning or just meals that are being sent home to kids. So they can, if parents can pick them up, or they can serve outside of the different meal times. We're also doing a waiver for potable water. With the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, at lunch, there's a requirement that potable water be available, which is certainly a good thing. But if schools are sending meals home or meals are going to the classroom, that's a lot of additional items for the schools to be juggling and distributing. So asking for a waiver for that. Age grade groups, there's 3 meal patterns depending on the age of the student, and if we're sending meals home, that definitely complicates that process. Currently, the summer feeding program only has 1 age grade group, so they haven't had to mess with that this year, so, or since school's been out. But looking for a waiver for just to serve a K-8 meal pattern. wrote a waiver for variety of milk. Milk is still required, but they're supposed to offer 2 different kinds. And again, that complicates sending meals home if you have to offer 2 different kinds. And then the last waiver is for the after-school snack program, that an enrichment activity be part of the program. And so again, this would enable, if that requirement is waived, then they could send snacks home with students and they wouldn't have to be eaten at school. We do have a work group. They're actually meeting right now, and that's the meeting I'm going to jump to. But from food service directors all over the state, UP, Detroit area, small, large, trying to get their input and group think on some more guidelines for serving meals in the new school year. We're quite confident that Governor Whitmer's plan is not going to include food service as part of it, or much, maybe just a mention. So we're trying to have some amount of blueprint for schools to use and have some guidance that they can use in their planning for the fall. So those are some of the projects that we're working on. So does anyone have any questions? There's still certainly a lot of unknown about what school will look like, but we're trying to base things on CDC recommendations, and we'll just keep going one day at a time.
This is where there are so many questions. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. We used to do a lot of outreach at meetup, eat up sites in the summer. And I know there's sort of been a lot of discussion of how those might look. And we try and direct people, you know, 2-on-1 and the maps don't have anything on them yet. And I know there's like the dates of the waivers and all that jazz. Do you have any idea when you might have updated information about summer feeding sites?
So like right now, the map, the meetup and eat up map should show what's called the unanticipated school closure sites, and those run through June 30th. And then it should flip the switch, fingers crossed, on July 1st, then they'll be able to see the summer feeding sites that are available. We do send a list like every day to 211, so they have updated site information. But the map can't handle unanticipated school closure and SFSP at the same time. So right now we might be missing some, but yeah, that is what we're working on right now. So July 1, it will switch to the summer food service program sites.
Thanks.
And that's a good reminder that we can help share that information out. So I'll try to mark my calendar so that we get a communication out, assuming that it does switch over on July 1. So maybe let us know, be in touch if it has any troubles in case, but that would be great. And a couple other things I wanted to note. I really appreciate the reminder that lunch is not optional, as Diane Golzinski phrased it. So that's something that's important for everyone to know working in their local communities, that school districts are supposed to be serving lunch. So it's not an option even in planning for different school year to not serve lunch. So that is something we can be helping folks plan for, assuming it will be there. And one other thing, and I'd be interested to hear what you all think about this, that we were recommending through some of the local food councils that are operating around the state, was to support their local food service director, nutrition services provider in maybe getting to the table for planning for the school year in their local school district and with their local administrators. Any other thoughts on that, or what folks can focus on at home?
I mean, we've definitely encouraged people to try to get involved, but I mean, there's different politics in every district, and some food service directors are of course right at the table, you know, in the discussion, and others have had to get their way in. So, but it is important that food service is a part of it. And I think in many districts, with the pandemic, they've realized how important food service is in their schools. And so I think that is a silver lining with all of this, but there's still some that have more difficult relationships.
Yes. So a space for local support if and as needed. And we've been trying to learn as much as we can and engage where we can. So one thing that we're talking about doing is maybe hosting some farm to school discussion groups with school food service directors that would like to participate and have those conversations, maybe as part of some of the School Nutrition Association of Michigan meetings. So as we get started with that, Emily, it'd be good to connect back with you and the flexible feeding options work group and have a mind meld between the two. But we're just trying to raise keep the conversation going about farm to school and local foods as options and good options and a really good way to support local farmers and the local economy in this time too.
Yeah, and I think that's been another win during this time too, is people are like, whoa, what can I get that's right here and local? So that's good.
Cool. Any last questions for Emily?
There is in the chat. Why is it that the governor is not taking food service into planning? I can't say that she's not, but I know that Diane Golzinski, who's the director of our department, offered to be on the planning team, and she was told that she wasn't needed. So as most of us are aware, most of the time school food service gets overlooked in the district. It can definitely happen. And so it's important, but I think they're focusing more on the education side of it. So, and we are trying to get at least our initial work group information or documents out before June 30th. So I have 12 different people, sharing edits around and all of that at the moment. So hopefully at the beginning of next week, we'll be sending those out. So.
Hey, Emily, this is Lori. I just wanted to ask, did you see the things that came up by CDC? Food.
The school guidelines?
Yeah, that came up earlier this week or late last week. Yeah, I assumed you guys did. I just didn't know. I know they came through one of my mailings just as a.
Yeah, I saw that they updated.
Probably more on the safety component than we're gonna, but.
Yes, and we have some resource list and things included too with what we're putting together as well. So.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you both. Really appreciate the update, and we'll stay tuned to hear more as this is an evolving situation. When your plans are available, Emily, how can folks access them before you go?
It will be emailed out on our school nutrition bulletin. I don't know if people in your group are on that listserv or not. Some
of us are, so we can always recirculate too.
And that would work. I'm not sure how quickly we'll get it posted on the MDE website, because then we have to have it ADA compliant, which is another set of hoops to jump through. But we're at least going to be emailing it out to people, and then I think we'll at least we were talking about maybe a tag on the on our website saying, if you would like this document, email, and we can email it back to you. So the workaround of the website requirements.
All right. Well, we'll do our best within the network to stay on it and help share out.
Perfect.
Thank you both so much. If Jamie's still there, I think she is.
I'm here.
Thank you, Jamie, from your
No, thank you.
Take care. And thank you, Emily, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
All right. So next, we've got a lot of dense information here today, but we're going to pass it back to Lori Yelton, who is with our Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. So this is another state agency perspective, and she's a food management and nutrition consultant. So Lori, take it away.
Thanks, Colleen. So on my slide, I really tuned into what was going on, probably what most people are thinking or concerned about. And interestingly, I want to follow up with Teresa. You know, I did put on there that one of those executive orders, I'll just give a briefing on, is the 2021-11. And actually in my chat, I found a link. So just so you know, we do work with the housing component, and I'm trying to, so if there's a link there, if anybody wants to see that, that kind of gives our report. We have an actual division of environmental stewardship, and within that, there's actually a program on migrant labor and housing. So if you want to see reports or see things or know, because we do work with legal aid. I know that when I was investigating things for the poverty task force, that was a group that I was recommended to talk to about things as well. So if anybody's interested, just you know where we work with that. And with our department and the governor, there was an executive order that came out, and it's 2021-11, protecting the food supply of migrant and seasonal workers as well on these effects of COVID-19. It went into effect June 21st. I have down that goes through June 29th. So we'll see if there's something that will follow. Often we see these, and sometimes they're even late, but there usually is a follow-up with that, depending on how busy things go through with SCOC. So that again, in that, what Teresa was saying as well, they are given guidance. Anybody that has the license, and that's what we get through the Department of Ag, is the licensing component of that. And then we do go out and inspect these to make sure that they're complying. And with with reports of that, we can have things written up. We can also, for employees, have them go through my OSHA. So my OSHA is the one really, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. Another link here is the one that will take complaints of employees, of employers, of things that they're concerned about. So we can give guidance and things, and we can verify or have things to do with the licensing. But when it comes to the employee themselves, there's another route that we do on that, just so you are aware of that. And so, yep, she went over some of the things. Then they are supposed to, if they have somebody that is suspected possibly of having COVID or is positive, they do have to report it. They do have to provide safe housing, bathrooms, dining, the PPE. So if there's somebody that's caring for them, like taking the meals, things like that, they should have somebody that equipment should be available. There should be things posted so people know how to get a hold of MyOSHA or the local health department. So all that's in this, if you go to the 2021-11 to help with that. And it's good to hear Teresa's voice and what's happening and what's not, and maybe where we need improvements for sure. The next one I have is the 2020-126, and that's our, there's been a screening protocol. So I don't know if you remember, I think it was, I'm looking at maybe in 109, yes, we had Executive 109, which has been rescinded since. It was really going into all businesses and workplaces, including now food establishments. This is all in one executive order, 126. They were separate at one time. And it just goes into businesses understanding what they need to do. Before, I don't know if you went into places, you would, they would have to ask questions. You know, if you've been out of the state, are you having a temperature or a cough, things like that. Now, you may still get some of those in healthcare, but with food service, they're not necessary any longer. They're running the same as other businesses. So there is a screening program. They have to have a protocol. They have to have procedures written and a response report of what to do in case somebody does come down with COVID and what they're supposed to do. So all these things, again, are listed in that executive order. So if people are looking for anything, that's really where you want to go. It's 126 kind of sums all that up regarding any kind of food service establishments. And then Executive 127 came out, which declared continuation of the state of emergency. And that one came out, I think, on June 1st and goes through, it's July 15th or 16th. Yeah, I think it's July 16th. And again, that just vests the governor with the power to continue to put these orders out as necessary to keep the COVID under control as much as best possible. And I don't know, from my understanding, we may see that extended even a little bit more so. Under that 127, also I put it because of food licenses. So we do, the local health department do collects these food licenses, and there's been an extension on that because of COVID. So none of the licenses will be there will be no fees for late, and they have up to 60 days of whenever the state of emergency is declared ended. So we have some in and some not. It has actually an effect on our food safety education funds and what kind of grant funds we'll have, but that is something just to allow a little bit more leniency with all the businesses and all that they've gone through to not have to worry about paying that fee at this time. And let's see, the only last thing I have there, there's a link there under COVID-19 link for food businesses and consumers. If you click on that, that goes through all the different forms that people might be looking for regarding, and that's the one where too with my OSHA, if you're looking for workers' complaints or concerns. I don't know if I can click on that link. Can I click on that link and just show them, Colleen?
I can try to here.
Okay, I'll be quick after this. I just wanted people to know. This kind of really puts a sum for helping people, I think, when they're looking for something. Because it kind of has a tab for each thing. So when people are really looking, I think this probably is what we get a lot of questions. And so this is where the SEOC really worked together to put this. So Health and Human Services is in here and other departments as well when people are asking questions. So if it doesn't come up, people can try it though. I think it would. There you go. So if you go down, yeah, so if you scroll down where it says like workforce safety for employees, migrants, all these in here, they can click on that and what to do. So, you know, nursing aid, it goes through a lot of different, but it really is to help employees so that they know what is they can do in this pandemic time.
All right, I will try to put that in the chat then too.
Yeah, if it doesn't, I don't know if people have a copy of the slide or not. I did try to make it live so that people, if they got the slide, they'd be able to open it.
Yeah, we can share that out also.
Okay, thanks. And the last thing, I know we've had some questions in some of my other meetings of Senate Bill 690. I think it was House Bill 3, which appropriates $1 million towards double up food bucks people are asking about. So that increases our subsidies during this COVID time. And it is good, but it's not to be used for any administrative costs, my understanding. And that's part of the $880.1 million relief that's coming through and being appropriated for COVID relief through the legislative at this time. And I think that's all I have. I mean, anybody have any questions?
One initial question, Lori, since I know you're involved in the Farmers to Families food box programs and getting that out. Do you want to give a quick update of what you're hearing and how it's going?
Sure. So if you didn't know, USDA gave money that was to allow farmers to get rid of their excess food. A lot of this food that was being grown there was no place to go in the beginning. All the restaurants gone, the schools gone, things like that, and they were having a difficult time. Even hospitals numbers were down as far as all the procedures and things. So they are through the USDA, and it's through AMS, FNS, it's the marketing component, gave out grants to distributors to allow them to get farmers to sell foods to them to distribute in boxes to different places such as nonprofits, food banks, and we got I got schools involved in this. I don't know if MDE is happy with me or not, but we did. We got over 200 schools that were receiving these boxes as well. So what they did is these boxes were good for May to June. They'll be good again July through August, and then every 2 months through December as long as the program is necessary. One of the things we're seeing now is that some schools are saying that, hey, I have this distributor and they're ending it at the end of June. So I've asked MDE to pass those people on, and I'm going to try to pair them up. There are being audits done. So when they put these proposals through, if they're not following through with what they said they were going to do, they could lose that. Others could possibly just say, hey, we're getting busy now. Restaurants are opening. We can't do both of these. We're going to just go back to this and not take that funding and that grant. So there's different reasons, and I am going to be following up tomorrow with a lot of those distributors. We just have been waiting for USDA to give us the updated list of who will be on there, what distributors for the Midwest will be on there starting July 1st. So schools, yes, still can get those boxes, and they're great boxes if you've seen some of the pictures. A lot of produce. We have dairy boxes as well through Prairie Farms, and they've opened up to all 800 schools if the school districts and our schools were interested. There's also combination boxes of some meat, which are dried meats. Everything's cooked. or dried, and some dairy products as well, and then the produce. So yeah, it's been a big help.
Great. Glad to hear it.
I see Xavier, yeah.
Any questions for Lori? And if anyone has anything at a later date, we can always connect you to Lori too if you're not already connected. All right, not seeing anything. There's someone. Any questions? Okay, so not hearing any questions, I will thank Lori for her time. We appreciate it. And now that we have heard updates from different perspectives about some of the different issues in response to the coronavirus pandemic, I did want to kind of take a minute. I'm going a little off script here too. I know we have fewer people on the line now, but I did want to take a chance that we have you all here together to gauge what some of your most pressing food systems related questions are right now, and farmed institution related questions. We can plan to have topics of interest to you all on our future meetings like this, and we want to stay relevant for you all. So if there are any questions that you have now that we can answer either right away with some of our network members and advisory committee members, then we would love to do that. And or we can use that information to help us plan for a future virtual network meeting. So I'm going to take a moment to pause and see if anyone has any pressing questions. Feel free to chat them in, or you can chat them straight to me or Mariel if you want to do so more privately. But just wanted to take a second to reflect on most pressing questions or issues. Going once, going twice. And we can always follow up with some of our communications too, engage that.
We had a possible topic submitted by Callie, individual portion fruits and veggies for K-12 nutrition.
Yes, that's going to be a hot topic and a big opportunity for market development too, for processing. So that's something we would like to know more about for local products available in those forms as well. And I think John might have dropped off the call, but we had John from a hospital on earlier, and I'd be interested to hear from the hospitals too, how important that's going to be. I imagine very also. So that might be across institution types. Hey, John, you're still here. Anything in particular to hospitals?
There is actually a question about hospitals from Paula, hospital systems losing revenue and how that might affect food service.
Yes. Big topic.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
All right. How are you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, we saw huge, as you can imagine, just huge declines in revenues when everything got locked down tight. We had no visitation and really no procedures other than literally emergent surgeries being done. But we're kind of climbing back up out of that right now. I think we're probably at about 70. We're in Battle Creek, we're about 75% of our budgeted revenues for the year. Kalamazoo is maybe just a little bit ahead of us. So we're starting to climb back out of that. We had a lot of issues with, more so in the supply chain, where some of our vendors had produce that normally they would have, dispersed throughout the community, and there was no need for it. And one would think that our pricing would go down in those regards, but our quality was going down and our pricing was going up at the same time. We've had some issues with milk. We've had issues with some local produce. We don't have too much local produce available quite yet. We've seen just huge spikes in beef, pork, seafood. They're just starting to kind of taper back off and start to come back down a little bit. Last week when the chef and I were looking at pricing, beef from this is mostly boxed beef, like top sirloins and inside rounds and eye of the rounds and New York strip loins, things like that. Our pricing had more than doubled from what it had been maybe 2.5 months ago.
Wow.
Something like that. Now, luckily, we get our pork products. We didn't have any issues with pork. We purchased pork through a co-op down in Coldwater, so we didn't have any issues there. I know Grant in Kalamazoo buys a lot through larger farms and through some Carlson Farms does grass-fed beef, and he buys produce from another large farm. We didn't seem to have too many issues with those vendors. It was really our major vendors, like our Gordons and our Cisco and Van Eerden and companies like that. It was the big box places that we were having issues with, and the local vendors really were able to keep us going. And that was helpful. Prairie Farms and Jake's with pork, different products, and the co-op down in Coldwater. A couple of our egg vendors, we didn't have any issues there. No changes in pricing, no supply chain issues. So that was a positive out of that. So that's kind of just a real brief summary. Again, we're just starting to see prices start to taper off and start to go back down to levels where they should be. At the same time, we're starting to see, some relaxation with visitation, obviously, and we have visitors in the hospital now. They're limited, but we do have visitors in the hospital. So we're, as a result of that, and just different practices coming back online. We're doing surgeries again, and regular procedures are coming back online. We're bringing staff back that had been maybe furloughed, or some areas were closed completely if they were just an outpatient facility. So that helped. That's obviously helping our volume. So we're getting there. Like I said, we're about 75% of where we should be right now in the food service realm. I think the hospital itself is probably doing a little bit better than that, but that's where we are in food service right now.
Thank you for that update. And John, can you introduce yourself to everyone just so they know in case they missed it?
Sure. My name is John Fear, and I'm the Director of Food Service and one of the executive chefs at Bronson in Battle Creek.
It's good to hear from you.
It's good to hear from you guys too.
And we can try to dive a little bit more into that topic. That's a good one. And we'd love to hear about how other institution types are responding as this moves forward. So we can try to dive into that budget and revenue and food price conundrum for hospitals and maybe colleges and universities too in some future calls. Thank you for that update, John.
Sure.
All right. I appreciate you humoring me with some questions and ideas for some future topics. And we will continue with our own MIFIN update now from our network. So just a few things we wanted to share and then we'll wrap up. We are just reminding you all that this is now officially summer, and we have our suite of awesome summer featured foods that are all Michigan agricultural products that are coming, if they're not here already. I'm on the hunt for strawberries, so I'm hoping to get my hands on some this week, but they've seemed harder to find and a little later than usual. So that's my own quest for this week and this weekend, is to get some strawberries. So I wanted to put the berry feature up there, but we have cucumbers, stone fruit, carrots, peppers, and blueberries all to come in summer. And we have all of those materials, including beautiful posters, on our Cultivate Michigan website, and you can see the URL at the bottom of the page there. And it looks like they're strawberries up north, and I think we've got them. I just can't seem to find them. So I'm going to try to get to a market this weekend and hopefully find them there. All right. So then next, I'm going to turn it over to Garrett Ziegler with MSU Extension to talk about another resource that we have coming soon.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen. Just wanted to let folks know, well, first off, remind folks that we do have the sourcing guide available on our website, which is a combination of all of the featured foods sourcing information that we've done for the last 6 years, from 2014 through 2020, 24 foods, I believe, combined, featured in there. So some are available year round, so be sure to check that out if you're looking for local sourcing information. And myself and my colleague Mariel also just put together a quick how-to video providing some information about the guide and kind of a walkthrough of how to use it to search by using the table of contents by featured food or by season, and to kind of hone in on specific suppliers. So that'll be being posted. We just wrapped up editing for that and are looking to get it posted in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Thank you, Garrett. And keep an eye out for that tutorial coming soon, and we'll certainly share the link again. You can find the Cultivate Michigan sourcing guide at the same featured foods page if you're interested in checking that out sooner than later. And it's something that we are working on updating, so just know that it's a challenging resource to keep up to date on the day-to-day, and we're doing our best with that and gonna get to some more updates in the near future too. Okay, so then the last bit of info we have is just a reminder of our calendar, which is a little sparser than usual this year given our stay-at-home status. So we're just focusing in on virtual network meetings. We've hosted 3 now with this meeting today, so we've got another 3 to go for the rest of the year. And as I mentioned, we will likely be hosting some farm-to-school conversations with school food service directors, and stakeholders, as far as I'm concerned, can be included in that depending on our venue. So we'll be doing some more work there to try to get schools ready to purchase local foods or continue to do so as they go back to school in the fall. And we would love to hear more about how we can help with hospital food service and or college and university food service. And I know their plans are still shaping up. So if ever you have any ideas for speakers or topics that we can cover in these upcoming meetings, please let us know, and we'll let you know as we have other opportunities to engage in addition to these meetings. So if you want to mark your calendar, our next meeting is on August 20th from 10 to 12 noon, a little earlier in the day, so hopefully we're all raring to go a little bit more. And we'll post more event information on our cultivatemichigan.org website. And with that, that's all of our content for today, but I wanted to see before we sign off if any of you all have any announcements for the good of the group. Any resources or tips or online events that we should know about? We got a lot of them today already. All right, I am hearing and seeing none. Mariel, you see anything there?
Nothing in the chat.
All right. Well, with that, I think we are able to close out our meeting half an hour early. So hopefully you all can enjoy a sunny, if not windy day. It's windy where I am. So enjoy the day, enjoy the weekend, enjoy the holiday coming up soon. And we will be in touch and hope to see you again in August, if not sooner. Thank you all. Take care, everybody. Be well.